The diamond necklace gleamed on Sarah's delicate collarbone during family dinner, and I complimented how beautiful it looked. That was my first mistake. My brother Marcus shot me a look from across the table, one of those calculating, predatory stares he'd perfected since childhood. I should have recognized the signs. 3 days later, Sarah came crying to our parents, claiming her precious necklace had vanished. Before I could even process what was happening, Marcus pointed his finger directly at me. She was admiring it at dinner, he said, his voice carrying that fake concern he'd mastered. I saw her looking at it real hard. My mother's face hardened instantly. She'd always favored Marcus, her precious firstborn, while I'd been fighting for scraps of attention my entire life. My father just sighed, that familiar sound of resignation that meant he'd already chosen his side. I didn't take anything, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the betrayal burning in my chest. But they were already searching my room, upturning everything I owned like I was some common thief. The necklace wasn't there, of course, because I hadn't taken it. But logic had no place in this house when it came to protecting the golden child. "You're a liar," my mother spat, her brown eyes blazing with manufactured disappointment. "How could you steal from your own sister?" That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to them whisper in the hallway about how disappointed they were. 22 years old, and they still treated me like the family screw-up. What none of them knew was that I'd been carrying this family financially for the past 3 years. My parents had no idea that their disappointing daughter was making 6 figures working remote for a tech company. While they assumed I was barely scraping by with my computer stuff, I'd been quietly ensuring Sarah could attend her dream college and that the mortgage stayed current. I'd discovered this talent for data analysis during my junior year, turns. Out being labeled the quiet one meant I'd learned to observe patterns others missed. My boss hired me straight out of college, and I'd been promoted twice since then. But I kept my success secret, knowing how my family operated. If they knew I had money, they'd either resent me for hiding it or expect me to fund their every desire. This way, I could help without the drama. Or so I thought. The monthly transfers from my account had kept Sarah at Stanford. The additional payment each month prevented the foreclosure notice my father had hidden from the family. Their electricity stayed on, their car notes stayed current, and their daughter stayed in school. All because the family disappointment refused to let them struggle. But as I stared at the ceiling that night, humiliated and betrayed, a cold realization settled over me. They had no problem believing the worst about me. They had no problem throwing me under the bus to protect Marcus and his golden reputation. Why was I protecting people who wouldn't even give me the benefit of the doubt? The next morning, Marcus smirked at me over coffee, that self-satisfied grin that made my skin crawl. He thought he'd won, thought he'd successfully cast me as the villain in another one of his storylines. "You know what really happened to that necklace," I said quietly. His smirk widened. "Prove it." That afternoon, our parents called me into the living room for a family meeting. The whole scene felt orchestrated. My mother's tear-stained face, my father's disappointed stance, Sarah's confused hurt, and Marcus playing the role of concerned brother. "We can't have a thief in this house," my mother announced, her voice trembling with dramatic effect. "We've decided you need to leave." My heart should have shattered. Instead, I felt something cold and liberating settle in my chest. "Fine." I walked to my room and began packing. Sarah followed me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand why you'd do this," she whispered. "I trusted you." Looking at my baby sister, barely 19, and so innocent to the manipulations happening around her, I made my decision. I'd been protecting them from the consequences of their own actions for too long. "Check Marcus's room," I told her quietly. "Look behind his Princeton acceptance letter. You know, the one he keeps framed?" She looked confused, but something in my eyes made her nod. Within 20 minutes, screaming erupted from upstairs. Sarah had found her necklace exactly where I'd suspected it would be, taped to the back of Marcus's framed acceptance letter, his little trophy case of achievements. The house erupted in chaos, but by then I was already loading my car. By the time Marcus sheepishly brought the necklace downstairs, making excuses about how it must have fallen in his room, I was already backing out of the driveway. My parents called after me, suddenly realizing they might have made a mistake, but I didn't stop. I drove straight to the bank and requested my phone. First, I stopped the automatic transfer to Sarah's student account, $2,500 a month that had been keeping her at Stanford. Then I canceled the extra mortgage payment that had been keeping my parents from defaulting, another $1,300 monthly. The utilities were next. I'd been covering the gap between what my unemployed father could pay and what they actually owed. Their car insurance, which I'd been supplementing because their credit was shot. The family cell phone plan that I'd added them to years ago when my father lost his job. One by one, I severed every financial connection between myself and the family that had just thrown me out over a lie. My phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from everyone, but the damage was done. They'd made their choice, and now they'd live with the consequences. I found a furnished apartment that day, signed a lease, and transferred all my belongings in one trip. The silence was deafening after years of constant family drama, but it was a clean kind of silence. That night I ordered takeout and sat on my new couch, finally understanding what peace felt like. 3 weeks passed in blissful quiet. I'd blocked everyone's numbers after the first few days of non-stop calls and texts. My work flourished without the constant family emergencies interrupting my day. Then I learned what had happened from my coworker Jasmine, whose cousin attended Stanford with Sarah. "Your sister had to drop out," she told me over lunch. "Something about financial aid issues. She's been trying to reach you." I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by anger. They'd kicked me out. They'd believed Marcus over me. They'd called me a thief and a liar, and now they expected me to save them from the consequences of their choices? The foreclosure notice had been served 2 days later. My father had finally admitted to my mother about the mortgage issues he'd been hiding for months. Without my secret contributions, their house of cards was falling rapidly. Marcus had been forced to defer his Princeton acceptance because suddenly the family couldn't afford his expenses either. He'd taken a job at a local coffee shop, his first real work experience. My mother had sent me a long email that I'd deleted without reading. The subject line was enough: "Please come home." But it wasn't home. It had never truly been home. Home doesn't throw you out based on lies. Home doesn't accuse you of theft without evidence. Home doesn't protect one child at the expense of another. Was building something new now, something that belonged entirely to me. 6 months after leaving, I got a promotion and a raise. My boss nominated me for a diversity leadership program, and I was accepted to speak at tech conferences about pattern recognition in data analysis. My career was thriving without the constant drain of family drama. I'd moved to a larger apartment in a different city entirely. The walls were painted in colors I chose. The furniture reflected my taste, not hand-me-downs or family politics. I'd started dating a software engineer named David who made me laugh and treated me with respect. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah, thinner than before, wearing a uniform from whatever retail job she'd taken since leaving Stanford. I almost didn't answer, but something in her posture made me open the door. "I'm sorry," were her first words. "For everything. For not believing you. For letting them kick you out. For not standing up for you." I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around my apartment with wide eyes. The hardwood floors, the modern furniture, the certificates on the wall from my recent achievements. "You were paying for everything, weren't you?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I found your old bank statements in Mom's dresser. She kept them, crying over them every night." Sarah's voice cracked. "She knows she messed up. We all do. But it's too late," I said, not unkindly. I know. She wiped her eyes. I just wanted you to know that I believe you now, and I'm proud of you. Look at all this. You're thriving. We talked for an hour. She told me about the family's struggles, about Marcus working multiple jobs, about their parents trying to save the house. I listened, but I didn't offer solutions. As she left, she hugged me tight. I miss you, she whispered. I know, I replied, but I'm not responsible for fixing everyone else's mistakes anymore. After she was gone, I called David and told him about the visit. He listened without judgment, then said, You're the strongest person I know. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the constant need to prove myself to people who would never truly see me. I'd found something worth more than family approval. Self-respect. The life I was building now was mine alone. Built on truth rather than secrets, success rather than enabling, and love rather than obligation. And it was beautiful.